The Radio Planet by Ralph Milne Farley, Chapter 16, Afterthoughts. There could be no doubt of it. Doggo's plane was gone, and with it had vanished all hopes of a speedy return to Cupia. Sadly, the two returned to the camp and gave directions to start back to Verkingi. But Miles Cabot was not a man to despair, or he would have yielded to fate many times in the past during his radio adventures on the Silver Planet. Already, as porters were loading the carts, his agile mind was busy seeking some way whereby to snatch victory from this defeat. So when the expedition was ready to start, he led it around the woods until he picked up the trail of the stolen airship. Quite evidently, the theft had not been made by Ant-Men, for they would have flown the machine away upon clearing the woods. No, it had obviously been taken by either Roy's or Verking's, who had wheeled or dragged it away. If he and Doggo could follow the path, they might yet be able to locate and recover their stolen property. The trail led north until it struck at right angles a broad and much rutted road which ran from Verking to the northeast territory of the Verkings, and at this point the trail completely vanished. Miles had a written conference with Doggo, at which it was decided to return at once to the city and make inquiries there as to a stolen plane. If no one knew of it, Doggo was to be dispatched on a new expedition into the Northeast Territory, and in the meantime Cabot to rush to the completion of the radio set. So they turned and left and took up the march to Verkingi. It was a tired and disgusted human who returned that evening to the quarters which he had never expected to set eyes on again. Miles Cabot gave himself up to a few moments of unrestrained grief. As he sat thus, a soft, sympathetic voice said, "Didn't you succeed in finding what you sought? Oh, I am so sorry. At least you came back safely to me." But the blandishments of little Quiven, his pal, paled and failed to comfort him. That evening, when Judd returned from the brickyard, Miles sought an audience with him and demanded news of the plane. Said Miles, "This beast friend of mine came near here in a magic weapon which travels through the air. Possession of this magic weapon would mean much to Verkingi in your wars, and especially if the beasts ever take it into their heads to attack you, as they undoubtedly will do sooner or later. Yesterday, Dog and I embarked on a secret expedition to bring this magic wagon as a surprise to you and Theof, but we find that it has been stolen. We have traced it to the northeast road, and there the trail ends. It must either be in this city or in the northeast territory. Will you help me to find it?" But Judd smiled a crafty smile and said, "It is not in Verkingi, of that I am certain, nor will I send you into the northeast territory to find it for you, for I well know that you would use it to return to your own land beyond the boiling seas. We wish you to stay with us and do wonders for us. We believe that we can make your lot a happy one among us. But remember that although you are treated with great honors, you are nevertheless still my slave. Any attempt on your part to locate the magic wagon will be met with severe punishment, and an end will be put to your experiments. I have spoken." Miles Cabot met the other's eye squarely. "You have spoken, Judd," he said. Miles was now convinced that Judd knew more about the missing plane than he was willing to admit to. So the only thing to do was to lie low, bide his time, and keep an ear out for news of the plane, and continue the manufacture of the radio set. Thus the Earthman ruminated, as he walked slowly back to his quarters. And then the linking of the radio and airplanes in his mind gave him an idea. He had felt all along that what he was doing was the correct thing in building the radio set, rather than in manufacturing firearms with which to attack the Formians, or in trying to fabricate an airplane for flight across the boiling seas. His intuition had been correct. His subconscious mind must have guided him to make a radio in order to phone Cupia for a plane to come over to Verkingi and get him. Why hadn't he realized it before? It gave him new heart. With a laugh, he reflected on that this afterthought was pretty much like those so characteristic of the man whom he had just met or left. Judd, the excuse-maker, always bungling, always with a perfectly good excuse or alibi, thought up afterward to explain why he did something which, when he did it, was absolutely pointless. Miles had always looked down on the Verking noble because of this failing, but now that he found himself going through exactly the same mental processes, he began to wonder if perhaps Judd was not guided by a fairly high-grade intuition. Perhaps Judd's afterthoughts and excuses were but the breaking through of realization of some of the forethoughts on the part of Judd's subconscious mind. Miles wondered, and he was still wondering when he fell asleep that night. The next morning, he plunged into his work with a renewed vigor. He now had copper wire, copper plates, wood, mica, soldered builder platinum, glass, and batteries, everything he needed for his radio set except a better vacuum for tubes. But without that, he was far from success as he had started. Of course, he knew what he needed magnesium, but it was the one thing to step into a drugstore on the Earth or in a chemical laboratory in Cupia and take magnesium off of a shelf, and quite another matter to pick this elusive element out of thin air in Verkingi. Nevertheless, in spite of this lack, Miles kept on working. He wound his inductances, transformers, earphones, and rheosats. He assembled his variable condensers and microphones. He fashioned his sockets and lamp bases. He strung his antenna. He wired up his baseboard and panel. Small sets were installed in Quiven's rooms, at the palace, at Judd's house, and at the brickyard. Each of which of these was equipped with a transformer coupling for Doggo's antenna, as well as with a mouthpiece for others, so that now at last oral conversation was possible with his Formian friend. Later, he would prepare a portable headset such as he had worn in Cupia. Laboratory experiments demonstrated the success of his sets in everything except durability of tubes, yet in spite of this drawback he was able to communicate across his laboratory and even with Judd's house, and under favorable conditions with Quiven at the palace by using the cold tube hookup. But this was not powerful enough to send as far as a brickyard, let alone Cupia. At this juncture there appeared one morning at his gate a Ver-King soldier in a leather tunic and helmet, requesting entrance with important secret news. Miles grudgingly left his workbench and gave audience. The fellow had a strangely familiar appearance and smiled in a quizzical manner, yet Miles could not place him. "Who are you?" Miles asked. "Do you not know me?" the other asked in reply. "No." The soldier doffed his leather cap. "Do you know me now?" "No." "A life for a life?" "Now I know you," Cabot exclaimed. "You are Otto the Bold, son of Grod the Silent, who is king of the Roys. To paraphrase one of the proverbs of my own country, a face that is familiar in Sir is oft a stranger in Verkingi. I did not recognize you away from the surroundings in which we met. What good fortune brings you here?" "Not good fortune, but bad," the Roy replied. "It is true that Grod my father is our king, but it is also true that Et the Terrible likewise claims the kingship. At loves Arkilo, and is even at this moment on the march against Verkingi with the largest army of Roys ever gathered." Miles smiled. "We are grateful for the information," he said. "With this forewarning we are secure against attack." "If you will pardon me," Otto continued, "I think that you are not secure, for one of your own Ver-Kings, Tippy by name, marches with At. At has promised Tippy the glorious golden quiven in return for Tippy's support, and Tippy has many partisans within the city." Miles continued to smile. "We can deal with traitors," he asserted smugly. "There are many lamp-posts in our city." But Otto kept on. "Sir has fallen." "What?" the Earthman shouted, at the last shocked out of complacency. "The rock-bound impenetrable fortress of Sir fallen? But this is impossible." "Not impossible to those who travel through the skies and drop black stones which fly to pieces with loud noise," Otto calmly replied. "The beasts of the south have made an alliance with At the Terrible and Tippy the Steadfast, and are marching with them. Good builder, they are upon us even now. Quick, the beasts enter this very room. Come, draw, defend yourself." Wheeling quickly, Cabot confronted Doggo, standing in the doorway. Much relieved, he explained to Otto who this newcomer was. Then, seizing a pad and a lead stylus out of his own manufacture, he hurriedly sketched the situation to his Formian friend. In reply, Doggo wrote, "At least I have magnesium ore. Some soldiers brought it in, attracted by its pretty red color. There is no time to be lost. To the laboratory! You must complete your set and summon aid from Cupia. Meanwhile, I will get Judd on the air and call him here for conference. We have no time to wait upon him, or even Theof, in this emergency." Miles read the message aloud to Otto. "It is well," the latter commented. "Now, if you will excuse me, I must be running along. My disguise as a Ver-King soldier will get me safely out of your city, and I must join my father, who is planning a counterattack, if a fit opportunity presents itself. Till we meet again." "Till we meet again, in this life or beyond the waves," the Earthman replied, "and may the Builder bless you for your help this day." Then he rushed to the laboratory. Doggo was already tuning the set. "Judd is not at home," he wrote. "Shall I waste a tube on the brickyard?" "No," Miles signified with a shake of his head. Then, seizing the pad and stylus again, he wrote, "I will try and get Judd. You meanwhile attempt to extract magnesium from this piece of carnellite." The Ant-Man knew exactly how to proceed. Grinding the ore, he mixed it in salt and melted the mass in an iron pot, which he connected electrically with carbon terminal to the line of electric batteries. In the boiling pot, he placed a copper plate connected with zinc elements of the cells. By the time the Earthman returned from calling Judd on the radio, a coating of pure magnesium had begun to form in the copper anode. An hour or so later, he scraped off his first yield of the precious metal, the final necessity of his projected radio set. At this stage, Judd appeared. Pardon the delay, he began to explain. You see, But Miles cut him short with, never mind explanations now. It's enough that you are here. Sir has fallen. The beasts of the south and at the Terrible are on the warpath. They seek to rob you of your Archillu. With their aerial weapons, they will drop magic rocks upon the city and destroy it. Give Doggo back his plane, and he will try to combat them. But Judd shook his head. You would merely escape, he replied, and then we would be worse off than now. Then you admit you know the whereabouts of Doggo's plane? Miles eagerly asked. Not at all, not at all, the Fair King suavely replied. I was merely stating that even if I knew where this plane, as you call it, is, for builder's sake, man cut in. This is no time to quibble over words. Give us the plane if you would save Theoth, yourself, and Archillu. It's hardly necessary, Judd asserted, unruffled. Don't get so excited. If At wants Archillu, he certainly won't drop things on the palace, and we can defend the palace against all the Roys in Verkingi. But not against magic slingshots, replied the Earthman. Perhaps not, the noble said with a crafty smile, but we shall see. Now I go to prepare defense. You are at liberty to come with us if you will, or putter around with your tubes if you would rather. Goodbye. Shift for yourselves, then, Miles shouted after him, and frantically resumed his work. His attempt to get the plane by stratagem had failed. Perhaps Judd did not know anything about the plane after all. It would be typical of him. Miles had plenty of sets of grids, plates, and filaments all prepared. Also plenty of long tubes of Pyrex glass. All that remained necessary was to coat the platinum elements with magnesium, fuse them in the tubes, exhaust the air by the water method as before, seal the tube, and his radio set would be complete. Where is Quiven? He wrote to Doggo. She ought to be here helping with this. On her way from the palace, the Ant-Man replied. I radiophoned her there. Presently she entered and jauntily inquired what all the excitement was about. Miles explained as briefly as possible. Her only answer was to shrug her golden shoulders and remark, Tippy is a little fool. He can have me if he can get me. Then she took her seat at the workbench. After a while she inquired, why the rush with the radio set when Verkingi is in peril? Miles replied, our only hope is to get Cupia on the air and persuade my followers there to send across the boiling seas enough aerial wagons to defeat the beasts of the south, or these Formians, as we call them. And you will talk to your Lilla? She asked innocently. Yes, if the builder wills, he eagerly and reverently replied. To his surprise, Quiven jumped to her feet with flashing eyes, and seizing a small iron anvil from the workbench, she held it over the precious pile of platinum elements. And if I drop this anvil, you will not talk to her. Is that so? Miles, horrified, sat rooted to his seat, unable to move.